In the 9th century, the city of Rome wasn't a beacon of faith. It was a battlefield of politics disguised in sacred robes. The papacy, supposedly the spiritual center of Christendom, had become a throne of power, bribery, and bloodshed. Imagine for a moment. A pope dead for almost a year, being dragged from his tomb, dressed in rotting papal robes and put on trial. No, this isn't fiction. This actually happened. And what you're about to discover about the 9th century church will shock even the most skeptical among you. This is the story of the Cadaver Synod, the trial of a corpse that exposed the moral rot at the heart of the Holy See. To understand the madness of what happened in 897, we need to go back a few decades. The 9th century was an era of absolute chaos for Europe. The Carolingian Empire was fragmenting. Vikings attacked from the north, Saracens from the south, and at the center of it all, Rome struggled to maintain its political relevance. The Pope wasn't just a spiritual leader, he was one of the most powerful players on the geopolitical chessboard of the time. He controlled vast territories, commanded armies, and had the power to crown emperors. But with great power comes great corruption. The noble families of Rome, especially the Spoletos and the Carolingians, fiercely competed for control of the papacy. Not for matters of faith, but for pure temporal power. The Pope who could maintain the throne could redistribute lands, form military alliances, and effectively govern much of central Italy. It was in this scenario of intrigue that our protagonist emerged, Formosus. But who really was this man? And how did he become the center of the most bizarre scandal in papal history? Formosus wasn't an ordinary pope. Born around 816, he had built a reputation as a brilliant diplomat long before dreaming of the papal tiara. As Bishop of Porto, he traveled extensively, representing papal interests in delicate missions. His first major controversy came in 864, when Pope Nicholas I sent him to Bulgaria to negotiate the conversion of the Bulgarian people to Roman Christianity, as opposed to Byzantine. Formosus was so successful that the Bulgarian king himself asked the Pope to name him permanent Archbishop of Bulgaria. But here the problems begin. Canon law prohibited a bishop from abandoning his original diocese. When Formosus showed interest in the Bulgarian proposal, this was seen as excessive ambition. Pope John VIII, who took office in 872, not only refused the transfer but excommunicated Formosus in 876, accusing him of conspiring to usurp the papal throne. For 3 years, Formosus lived in exile. But papal politics are volatile. In 878, he was absolved and reinstated. In 883, he became a respected figure again. And in 891, he finally got what he had always wanted, the papal tiara. But his enemies didn't forget. And in Rome, memory is long, especially when it comes to revenge. The papacy of Formosus, from 891 to 896, was marked by controversial decisions that sealed his posthumous fate. His greatest controversy was the coronation of Arnulf of Carinthia as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 896. This decision infuriated the powerful Spoleto family, who had supported Lambert of Spoleto for the imperial title. Guido of Spoleto, Lambert's father, had been crowned emperor by Formosus's own predecessor. By crowning Arnulf, Formosus not only reversed previous policies, he declared war on the Roman aristocracy. The Spoletos controlled much of the papal territory and had powerful allies among the local nobility. Arnulf's coronation was seen as a betrayal of the papacy's Italianness. But Formosus had his reasons. Arnulf was an experienced military leader and had promised to protect Rome against Saracen incursions. It was a strategic move but politically suicidal. During his 5 years in power, Formosus also reversed several decisions of previous popes, reinstated clergy who had been deposed, and reorganized entire dioceses. Each of these actions created more enemies. When he died in April 896, few mourned his departure. But no one could predict the horror that was to come. Formosus's death created a power vacuum that was quickly filled by his enemies. His immediate successor, Boniface VI, ruled for only 15 days before being mysteriously removed, possibly poisoned. The speed of his fall suggests a well-orchestrated conspiracy. In his place, the Spoleto family managed to install their candidate, Stephen VI. Stephen wasn't just a political enemy of Formosus, he was a man consumed by hatred. He had been appointed Bishop of Anagni by Formosus himself, but this only intensified his resentment. In the medieval mindset, being elevated by someone created a debt of eternal gratitude. Stephen saw his promotion as a humiliation. More importantly, Stephen was completely under the control of the Roman aristocracy. The Spoletos didn't just want to reverse Formosus's policies. They wanted to erase him from history, and Stephen would be their instrument. In the first months of his papacy, Stephen worked methodically to undo his predecessor's legacy. He reversed appointments, canceled decrees, reorganized dioceses. But this wasn't enough. The Spoleto family wanted something more dramatic, something that would send a clear message. Defying their interests had consequences that transcended even death. In January 897, almost 9 months after Formosus's death, Stephen VI ordered something unprecedented in Christian history: the exhumation and trial of his predecessor's corpse. The decomposing body was removed from its tomb in the Vatican during the early morning hours. Imagine the scene: papal soldiers by torchlight desecrating a sacred grave. The stench must have been unbearable. The corpse was then transported to the Lateran Basilica, dressed in decomposing papal robes, and placed on a throne before a complete ecclesiastical tribunal. Stephen VI personally presided over the trial, shouting accusations at the silent body. The charges were technical but devastating. First, Formosus had violated canon law by accepting the papacy while still being bishop of another diocese. Second, he had committed perjury by breaking oaths made to previous popes. Third, he had illegitimately usurped the papal throne. Fourth, his priestly ordinations were invalid. A deacon was assigned to defend the corpse, but his defense was purely pro forma. How do you defend a decomposing body? The hall was filled with bishops and cardinals, many clearly uncomfortable with the macabre spectacle, but no one dared oppose it. The power of the Spoletos was absolute. After hours of trial, the verdict was inevitable: guilty on all charges. The sentence was even more grotesque. The 3 fingers of Formosus's right hand, those used for papal blessings, were cut off with a blade. His vestments were torn away. The body was dragged through the streets of Rome while the crowd watched in silent horror. Finally, the corpse was thrown into the Tiber River like common garbage. The popular reaction was immediate and furious. Even by the brutal standards of the time, the cadaver synod had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Rome exploded into riots. Crowds gathered in the squares, denouncing Stephen VI as a sacrilegious monster. The church itself was horrified. Bishops from all over Europe sent letters condemning the act. But perhaps the most dramatic reaction came from nature itself. A few days after the trial, an earthquake struck Rome, damaging the Lateran Basilica where the trial had taken place. For the superstitious population of the time, it was clearly a sign of divine wrath. The pressure on Stephen became unsustainable. In August 897, just 7 months after the synod, he was deposed and imprisoned. According to some accounts, he was strangled in his cell, a brutal death for a pope who had desecrated the dead. Meanwhile, devout monks had secretly recovered Formosus's body from the Tiber. The corpse was reburied with the honors due to a pope. His successor, Romanus, ruled for only 4 months, but managed to formally reverse the decisions of the Cadaver Synod. Subsequent popes continued to restore Formosus's reputation. His decrees were revalidated, his ordinations recognized as legitimate. The Cadaver Synod remains one of the darkest and most bizarre episodes in church history. It wasn't just about theology or canon law. It was about power, revenge, and the terrible extremes to which men are capable of going to erase their enemies, even if those enemies are already rotting in their graves. In the shadows of Rome's holy halls, politics wore a mask of piety, and a dead pope, dragged from his tomb, became the ultimate witness to a church at war with itself. The story of the Cadaver Synod reminds us of an uncomfortable truth, that even the most sacred institutions are led by men, and men, as history repeatedly proves, are capable of extraordinary acts, both of absolute goodness and absolute evil.